she must be the money.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's so nice to see very many familiar faces. And Happy New Year. All right, we're getting started now. Okay, so I'm Essie. I'm the founder of Products That Count. Products That Count has been around for a little over 2 years. And we've grown really fast, thanks to a lot of you coming back every month. We now have 15,000 people that we reach every week with our programs. And that has allowed us to make relationships with some really amazing sponsors. So the first sponsor that I want to thank is Yelp, who's our host, who's been with us from day one. Yes! And we love Yelp. The message that they have for you is that they are hiring. And in case you're wondering, they are also hiring engineers. Always hiring. If you are interested in working for them, it's a fantastic company. I encourage you to talk to Rebecca, who's under the Yelp sign in the back over there. And then we are also welcoming 2 new sponsors this year. The first one reached out. Where is Sherding? Here she is. Like, if you don't know her, you really should. She's one of the most energetic and passionate person I've met. And she came to me and said, this needs to be a community that continues to interact and exchange beyond, our different programs. And so we've created, thanks to her, a channel on WeChat. If you haven't yet used WeChat, you guys should, because that's kind of the future of mobile. And we'll be giving away throughout the year a bunch of stuff through that channel. So I encourage you to join it. There's a QR code that makes it very easy for you guys to do that. And then we are also welcoming a third partner, Pragmatic Marketing, which is a training company that offers a lot of programs. We'll be giving away a program tonight. So I'm super excited because this is the first time that we're sort of, welcoming some partners in the organization, and we've been very careful to select them to make sure that they actually provide real benefits to you. With that, I want to introduce our speaker for tonight, Bruce Cleveland. So Bruce, I met I don't even want to say how many years ago because it's going to date us, but we were both working for a company called Siebel Systems, and he was at the top and I was at the bottom. And so he doesn't remember me, but I remember him. And he was, what I call really an industry captain for the SaaS industry. Very early employee at Oracle, then early executive and founding team member at Siebel Systems, and then the first investor in Marketo, and he followed them through their IPO. And he's developed a method. I had a chance to hear one of his talks a few weeks ago, a method to predict how successful your company is going to be. And by doing that, how well a company is able to traverse the traction gap. I hope I got this right, Bruce, and I'm very excited to hear your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. How's that? Can everybody hear me? Great. How is everybody doing? Good. So I'm going to spend a fair amount of time talking about a couple of different things. One is this thing called the Traction Gap Framework, but I'm also really happy that we just finished a bunch of research, and we are going to share that research with you. You'll be the first people to see this, and it's focused around the function of product management and product marketing, probably something, a topic that might be of interest to everybody here. So I'm really excited to share it. And since it's the first time I'm going to be going through it, we might have a few rough edges around it, so bear with me. Let me grab this stick, this little, okay. So thank you for giving me that intro, SC. Like many of you, I came up through engineering and product management. I work for a number of companies you probably have heard of or familiar with. My first opportunity to work in Silicon Valley was with a small little company of 40 people, very private on Sand Hill Road, called Oracle Corporation. And that one actually turned out to have some modest success. In fact, I would argue that everybody in my family, that is my daughters, my wife, all worked at Oracle. So, it's kind of sort of the fountain of many interesting things. Salesforce and a lot of other companies, executives were born from that. So I worked on the product management, product engineering side at Apple. I was a chief product officer, chief marketing officer for Siebel Systems. So the majority of my career really is in the creation of commercial products, primarily B2B. I don't really do B2C because my experience at Apple was, I was involved in the Newton project, and so I don't do that. That was kind of a painful lesson for me. In 2005, September 12th, we signed a definitive agreement with Oracle, we being Siebel Systems, to be acquired. We sold the company for about $6 billion. And that gave me an opportunity to kind of think about doing some different things. And I decided that I might try out investing. I didn't know whether I'd be any good at it. And, I didn't know whether I'd like it either. Primarily early stage. So I joined InterWest Partners, which at the time was going through sort of a transformation. They wanted to build a software group focused on really whatever it is that I wanted to focus on. I thought, well, it'd be pretty interesting to do software as a service, because at the time there were only a few firms that were really doing that. There was Emergence Capital, Bessemer, but really very few. And there weren't a lot of truisms formed. That is, there really wasn't a body of knowledge around that. I thought, well, gee, if I'm going to be a new venture capitalist, this might be an interesting place. I could hang my shingle out, compete against others, and might have some measure of success doing that. I was very fortunate to, as one of my first investments, to run into three people who I think have been transformational in the information technology industry, specifically marketing. It was Phil Fernandez, John Miller, and Dave Morandi, and they were the founders of Marketo. And at the time, it was just an idea, but that idea happened to line up with something that we had on the drawing board when I was the chief product officer at Siebel. To bring to market. And so it's one of those mind meld things, in the boardroom, and we're kind of finishing each other's sentences that led to us investing in Marketo. And that by far is probably my best investment. I think it returned almost $400 million to our limited partners, which is the design of venture capital to make money. So these are the companies that I'm involved in. You'll notice that, as I said, almost everything's B2B. Doximity's a little different. It's kind of B to P, P being physician. So it's a LinkedIn for physicians, if you will. In fact, Konstantin Gericke, who was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, is on the board. So this is kind of the body of work that I've done. There's a few other things that I've been involved in as well as a private investor, et cetera. And the only orthogonal thing that I've done, just kind of lay some context for where all of these ideas that I'm going to talk to you about in the next few minutes are going to be. I created a professional skills academy called Ben Polytechnic Academy. We take liberal arts students who have, quote, no visible signs of employment in their future. And what we do is we convert them into 8 weeks, we take them from knowing nothing about digital marketing. We put them through an 8-week program. We teach them things like Marketo, Google Analytics, content marketing, and we get the best people from those companies like Marketo and Google to come and teach them. We put them on a project and a program, and then, ta-da, 8-10 weeks later, they went from barista at Starbucks in their future to digital marketer. And 80% of our graduates have all gotten jobs. I'm very proud of that fact, and I think we're making a difference for young people. Yeah.
Can you also address political science?
Sure. Yeah. We take all comers. We're not picky. So that's my background. I only want to say this because I'm not just doing venture capital. I mean, I've sat in your seat to build a product. And what we're going to talk about, I'm going to use the word startup, but realistically, everything I talk about tonight is applicable to large companies too that are delivering or trying to deliver new products into the market space. So that's the background. So I'm part of a new firm called Wildcat Venture Partners. InterWest decided to do healthcare only. That kind of left me out since I don't have a PhD in something that has anything to do with biotech or anything else. So they said, go get another job. So I went with a team and that I had known before, who came out of another firm called Moore Davidow, and we built a new firm called Wildcat. And I joined that in January of last year, so I've been there a year. They had formed the firm about 6 months earlier. We've done about 17 investments to date. But I want to take you through the process that we went through as we came together, because it will lay, I think, the foundation for what I'm about to talk about. If you're a new company and you're figuring out, well, what's our position? Who are we? What do we do? What are we really good at? Venture firms can do that too, and certainly as a new firm, we did. That process led to some introspection about each of my partners and myself, which is, okay, great. What do we do? What do we like to do? Where do we like to invest? When do we like to invest? Where are best investments from? When we went through that process, what we discovered unknowingly was that against industry averages across early stage investing, seeds, A's, and B's, and I'm going to hope that we're going to change your vernacular by the end of tonight about that concept, is that roughly 70%, I would actually argue about 80% of all startups fail. They fail to return capital. They fail to achieve objectives. Most just outright fail. They fail, that is, they fold. It's a pretty stark number. And when we took a look at the companies that we personally had invested in, and we took a look at their success rates, more than 70% of the companies that we invested in our prior firms have been successful. And we said, okay, look, there's a lot of smart people on Sand Hill Road. We cannot be the smartest people. What the heck? Why is this? Why have we done well? The answer to that question came through a series sort of other questions, but what really materialized was the fact that each of us are former operating executives. And not just operating executives in large companies, but we started with startups. We built our own companies. We brought them and we went through stuff that didn't work and stuff that did work. So when we started investing in companies at early stage, we tried to help in the form of guidance, or at least, are you sure you want to actually do what you're talking about doing? Because we had actually been through that process before. And I think that, I think if you take a look at early stage investing, my personal bias is that if you want to be a good investor at that stage, I think you need to have been an entrepreneur and you need to have gone through these issues. So that way you can actually, quote, add value, in these board conversations. Yeah.
In that exercise, how were you defining success?
Yeah. Well, the fact is that we've generated more than a 3 times net return to our limited partners. So to me, overall, so we have losses. I mean, I do not want to mislead you. I mean, there's companies that don't work. But if you aggregate all of them together, the net effect of that is a greater than 3 times net return, which is what the LPs care about. Net is just simply the management fees are added to whatever they put into as capital, and we return that 3 times or more. Does that make sense? Okay. So this was actually pretty interesting. In fact, we thought, and we continue to think, well, this is a pretty good track record. I mean, this is, I think, the way that limited partners will want to look at it. Unfortunately, limited partners, which are the groups that give us the money to invest in you and your companies, they're pretty wary of early stage investing, and they're very wary of it because of these facts, which is these failure rates. Okay. So now I'm going to dig into this. So as we began to talk about this, what began to form was a framework. We basically realized that there's 3 phases that all companies, all products must go through. There's the go-to-product phase, which is like what Steve Blank and Eric Ries talk about, where we get outside the 4 walls, we find product market fit, we iterate, etc. And there's a lot of help for us in that process. That help is constituted through groups such as Y Combinator or AngelPad or a variety of other accelerators and incubators that we can work with. You can go to Stanford, Berkeley, a variety of schools. You could take entrepreneurialism. There's just a lot of work and a lot of help in that area. So that's phase 1. Skip to phase 3. Phase 3 is the go-to-scale phase. That's where, hey, everything's kind of working. The product works. We're going to EMEA. We're going to APAC. We're going to Latin America. We need to look about we're going to add channels, indirect channels. We're going to scale out. Now we've got a 3-tier organization, so people reporting to people. There's a whole body of work for that, and a lot of consultants. In fact, one of my partners is Jeffrey Moore, who wrote the classic Crossing the Chasm. He's the definitive master of what that is, and after 25, 30 years of doing it, they've collected a lot of material, and there's a lot of consulting work to help there. But if you really take a look at what kneecaps companies. It's neither the go-to-product phase, really, although I'm going to give you some data that might suggest otherwise, or the go-to-scale phase. It's really the go-to-market phase that really becomes the tough point. Because what happens? You go through Y Combinator, everybody loves you, some venture capitalists or a couple of them give you some money, 3, 4, 5, maybe more million. And now your team is ready, you build a product, and now you're ready to go, except that none of you have actually ever done any of the go-to-market work. So I want to talk a little bit about that. This is where most companies fail. It's in this area of the go-to-market, and what we decided to do after talking about it is to create a set of terminology or vernacular, a framework, and we labeled it the traction gap, and we called it the traction gap for a very specific reason. It's the area, this is a financial period or a time period that we all must go through, and the biggest issue in terms of the startup is getting financing through that, being able to make it through that. And the issue that causes lack of financing or death is the traction gap. So before you can ever reach the chasm, you have to traverse the gap. And so we began to look at this and we took the terminology that Steve and Eric started with: initial product release, ideation, minimum viable product. And instead of trying to come up with new vernacular or terminology, we built upon it. So we introduced 2 new terms, something called minimum viable repeatability and something called minimum viable traction. These are both theoretical points in time. They are not absolutes, but they are points in time at which, so let's talk about MBR, you have built a product, you have several releases that you've done. You might have sold it a few times, so you've got some contracts that you've done. You figured out how to support it. You figure out how to sell it. You know what the demo needs to look like. And you're beginning to get a cadence. It begins to work where you know that you've got a demand waterfall. They start here. Within 90 days, you've gone through a sales cycle, and X converts into Y in terms of customers. All right. And I'm going to show you what those look like in terms of numbers, customers, et cetera. And then 4 to 6 quarters later, you reach this other magical point, if you can get there, called minimum viable traction. So what is minimum viable traction? Well, it's a number of things, but most importantly, it's the time at which Axel Bessemer and Andreessen all fight to put money into your company. Okay, so it's a theoretical point in time in which the brand investors all look at you and go, wow, that company is really doing well. And I'm going to show you what those numbers look like, the amount of time it takes to get through this gap, because you don't have forever to do this. So we put yeah. Yeah. I'm going to. Yeah. What's missing is a deep understanding of what it takes to create awareness, interest, and convert that into revenue. I think what you've done is reach product market fit, which says, okay, I'm pretty confident that the features that we have in our product, the market wants. Our customers want this. But what it doesn't tell you is how to cost effectively optimize that into actual recognized revenue. Correct. So this is both an investment process for us, how we look at you. We do a diagnostic, like, the classic in the directory of a shopping center where, you are here. What we like to do is to kind of figure out where you are with you, because that's going to determine how much capital you're going to need to get to these next points. And I'll back in. Hopefully I'll answer your question by going through this. What is true and what is a constant across, no matter where you are on the continuum of this entire go-to-product, go-to-market, and go-to-scale framework, are 4 pillars, or architectural pillars. Those are a product architecture, revenue, systems, and team. How mature those are dependent upon where you are in the gap, and you need to get your these 4 architectures ready in order to make it to that next point on the gap if you want to be successful in scaling. Now, I'm going to try to put some real meat around some of these concepts here. But again, product, revenue, team, and systems. And it's really more around how do you evaluate? Is your product ready to go to the next phase? Is your team ready? Is the revenue architecture well developed? And are your systems in place to support all of that? Okay, so I'm going to give you a little story. I learned that after I've been doing this now for 10 years, investing, and here's a classic, my day. So, team comes in. Usually the team is excellent in product. I mean, graduated from the best schools, worked at the best companies, and, there's 40 slides in the deck. Slides 1 through 38 are awesome about the technology. We're a LAMP stack, we're a Lambda stack. They talk, every product we're a Java shop. No, we use AngularJS, we use Node.js. They know it cold. And they've had great mentors in terms of how to build that product. So that's slide 1 through 38, TAM, total addressable market, all those great things. Skip to slide 40. Slide 40 is, here's how much we need in order to achieve this greatness that we're going to achieve with our first 38 slides. Slide 39 is what I affectionately called a miracle occurs slide, which is this giant revenue thing that looks like a ski launch. And so usually at that point I go, let's back up let's back up a little bit here. How are we going to achieve that revenue? Where's the 38 slides on revenue architecture? Because what I just told you before, which is that few companies make it through this traction gap. Of all the companies I've ever been involved in, either as an employee and or as an investor, there's only one company that I've been involved with that we either didn't sell the technology to somebody, which meant that it was valuable. It didn't mean we made money, but we sell the company and the tech to somebody, or it IPO'd and did awesome. That meant, and we haven't tried to build time machines, so, but for the most part, we have proven, at least for me, the things that we have taken on, we can usually build. Engineers are super smart, can figure it out. It may take longer, it may take, more iterations, but for the most part, everything I've been involved in at Apple, Oracle, Siebel, Marketo, we've been able to build what we said we wanted to build. But the problem has been is that converting that's great, but that isn't what kneecapped the companies that haven't made it. What kneecapped it was an inability for the team to be able to convert that into revenue. And why? Well, the reason is typically graduate from a great school, MIT, Stanford, etc. You go to work for a great company. You are basically coddled, okay? So if you're building this stuff, you are coddled by the other organizations that are assembled around you. You don't have to figure out who the sales organization is going to be and how to run that. You don't have to figure out how to do marketing. You don't have to figure out how to hire people. So what we do is we give people $5 million and we go, good luck. And then they experiment and they talk to friends and they're smart people. And the clock is ticking and the clock is ticking. And suddenly, now 6 months have gone by and we're not seeing anything. Well, let's try indirect sales. Let's try a self-service model. Let's trying lots of different things and nothing is working. And now we don't have 4 or 5 million in the bank. We got 1 million. And suddenly we have to worry about raising money. So we trot out to the venture community and we give them our story and they take a look at our traction and yawn. There's no return phone call. And suddenly now it's not so funny because there's almost no money in the bank. We're running on fumes. We've got to cut things out, etc. And what might have been a really incredibly great idea failed, not because it wasn't a really incredibly great idea. It's just because we gave a team without the expertise to be able to do these other things. And there was no place to go to learn how to do this. So the reason I bring this up here, I'm kind of making a little bit fun of it, but the truth is that there needs to be as much attention spent to the revenue architecture as there is on your product architecture. And most teams don't do it. Okay. So if I do anything tonight, what I would like to do is to convince you that the way that we have all been taught to think about companies, company maturity status, is wrong. When we talk about Series C, Series A, Series B, Series C. And I'm telling you, those are terrible proxies for company maturity. You don't know. I have a database company. We're on our 4th round of financing coming up. And we're not at MVP. So would you not invest in that? It's a $100 billion market. Takes a lot of money to build a database. It's not like, Facebook with a UX and 4 objects and a couple of, tables. I should be so lucky to have invested in Facebook. But the truth is that, that different companies require different amounts of capital, and they take different amounts of time. And evaluating a company on where it is based upon its financing round, I think is not a great idea. Your financing round is a point in time at which you are valued, but it is not a value inflection point. These points, these labels, initial product release, minimum viable product, MVR and MVT, these are. Now, if you can raise money, if you can design and engineer your financing so it lines up with reaching these milestones, you will maximize the value of your company and you will minimize the dilution that you get for raising capital. And I'm just pointing out some companies that our group is invested in, and to show you how different it is. Marketo I invested in at the very, very beginning. There was no code. Wasn't any dog running around, but there was no code. So, but we also invested in Series A in earnest, where it was almost at minimum viable repeatability. And Coupa, a guy that used to work for us at Siebel, Rob, who had a phenomenal IPO recently, we invested when all the way out at the end. Yeah. That's a great question. So one thing I don't do is invest in things I don't know a lot about. So I think being in venture, I know there's lots of people who are great generalists. I'm not one of those. I don't invest in shoes, I don't invest in interesting things that might be great investments. But I think to be successful, I think you need to have a personal point of view on what they're doing. You need to understand what the market is and who's buying it. And one of the reasons I'm a big fan of me doing B2B is because I've worked in B2B, I know B2B, and I can figure out, oh yeah, you know what, that's a really, really big expense that companies have, and I think we can optimize it. Other people don't need that. Mike Moritz, he was, Pulitzer-Prizing journalist. He didn't come from that. So I would be terrified, I'll be honest, I would be terrified doing early stage investor if I was doing it in things I didn't know anything about. But there are people who are just good at it. And so I think it's one of the reasons why, there is no pattern for great investors. I think it's all over the map. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's the answer I have. Yeah. It's a combination of all things because each team is a combination of many personalities. It could be team. You could have a very dysfunctional team. You could have 2 co-founders who end up hating each other, and that causes tremendous morale issues down below. It has nothing to do with the business opportunity. It could be they know nothing. They were great engineers, but they knew nothing about building a marketing engine, etc. One of the bigger mistakes I find, and I just wrote about this called The Interview in a blog post. One mistake that venture capitalists do, I think, and I think that teams do, is that you interview people for jobs that you've never personally held and really don't know a lot about. So my analogy would be, would you work on your own car if you didn't know anything about how to work on a car? Why not find a mechanic to do that for you? Same thing, I think, in venture, and if you're part of a management team, and by the way, you need to find people who have done it at the same time, that is the same point in time, that your company is going through. So if you were a great VP of sales for a large company, that doesn't necessarily mean you know what to do when you're a small company. So I would delegate. I would find 2 or 3 people you respect who held that role, and I would have them interview on your behalf. I think that venture investors tend to get we get hung up in our own egos, and we want to do the interview. And I think our job is actually to sell. So I like to sell people on why I did this investment, rather than interview. And even though I've held many of the jobs that we interview for, the fact is I haven't done it for 10 years. There's a lot of new stuff that's come online. A lot of people have done a lot of things. So I try to find people I respect who have done it, who are currently doing it, and I delegate my authority to them and rely upon them. So all over the map. I wish there could be a real pat answer, but there's not. You bet. Okay. So let's go ahead. Yeah.
I'm very familiar with
Great question. So what's the minimum viable team that you need? The answer to that is predicated upon where you are in the traction gap framework. So at the very beginning, for most of us, say we're a software company, it's really great engineering team. We don't really, in fact, this is one of the other issues. When do you start to scale the company? Because you bolt on sales and marketing back in the early, you're just spending a lot of money that you should not be spending. So minimum viable team is really a function of the point in time at where you are in the traction gap framework. So that's one of the reasons why we like to do a diagnostic of where are you on this, where is the team, and then we apply what we've learned from other pattern matching against this process. Does that make sense? Yeah. For me, it's the CEO. I invest in the CEO. I made some mistakes as an early investor to think that, okay, my job was to actually help form the team, pull it together, do all these things. That's what I thought early stage venture was. It's not my job. It's kind of like, my parents were both in education, professors, and doing it. And then they taught high school, AP English, math, and history. And I had them. And so I would sit in these classes, and then I go home, and get to hear about how that worked. So, the kids that were the unruly ones got all the attention, right? The 2 or 3 that were, troublemakers. The rest of us kind of just worked on our own. Now, AP was good, but I'm just talking about the other kind of standard courses. I think the same thing works in companies. What ends up happening in a portfolio company, you spend all your time on the ones that aren't really working, and you got to work, pull these things together. And the truth is, the ones that have really great CEOs, they build a team. I mean, I didn't have to do a lot for Marketo. I wish I could say, oh yes, I was instrumental in Marketo's success. Bullshit. It was Phil, Dave, and John. They did it all. I had some ideas. I gave them some thoughts, and they threw half of them away, and they kept some of them, and they built a company and made it successful. So to me, it's always the CEO. And it's why I don't try to hire or fire the VPs. That's not my job. It's the CEO's job. If they would like me to come and sell, again, not interview, sell on why I like the company and what I think about the market opportunity, I'll do that. Okay. So I talk a lot about this traction gap, etc. But what I want to do is share with you tonight some hot off the press data that we got around go-to-product. Because as it turns out, not all is glorious in the go-to-product phase either. All right. So MIT did a study and across 7,000 products. And what they found was that 89% of those products fail to meet initial revenue targets, fail to meet market share targets. And 46% of R&D expenditure is wasted. And the causation for this is around poor market input, pretty ad hoc methodologies, no solid, consistent processes, and poor product analytics, not using data to make product decisions. So we got this, we being Wildcat, and we decided that we would double-click on it and see if we could do our own studies. So we executed two pretty broad ones. The first was across multiple U.S. industries, 1,250 companies. And then the second one that we instituted was against just tech products, and we did a 1,000 company survey there. From there, we double-clicked, and we did discovery interviews with more than 100 of them. And these are, companies you might have heard of. I mean, these are companies like Facebook and Uber and Oracle and LinkedIn and Salesforce. I mean, these are good companies. The size, we tried to make sure it was balanced, so we didn't get a particular bias in the data. And what I want to share with you was the feedback from the people who did these interviews. We spoke to CXOs, product execs, product managers, engineering VPs, the people responsible for building the product. 85% of them came back and told us that their go-to-product process needed substantial improvement. Around that issue, around market input, like, are we good at it? Is it important? 79% said it was critically important. Yet when they ranked their company's ability to do it, their own groups to do it, they gave themselves a C, D, or F. Pretty interesting. Leading companies do use best practices, so they have a defined process, and many aspire to, but 2/3 don't. And you'll notice that most of these are B2C. Where we found the best practices were really in these B2C companies, very few actually in tech. The chief product officer for a company that will go nameless here said that what we really need to do is identify and standardize on product management best practices. How many went to school and got a bachelor's degree in product management? Exactly. Neither did I. You know where I learned product management? Went to Oracle, Apple, Siebel. I talked to friends. I learned through lore and myth. Oh, what wireframe stuff you use? Oh, that's great. Let's use that. That's what I learned. And luckily, I had some good people to teach me along the way. Look across the U.S. Look across the world. There's no Bachelor of Science in products yet. So, it doesn't surprise me that this is the state of the art. Leading companies leverage market data to make fact-based decisions. Okay, again, notice B2C. 79% don't. Somebody from a consumer company said, every decision that we make is based on associated data. I could tell you right now that Procter & Gamble, pretty severe when it comes to their process and how they make decisions. That process is not replicated in any of the software companies I've ever worked in. So, the net result, we have a lot more data, but I just pulled these things because we have actual time here that we had to meet with, is that 85% feel improvement is needed around these issues. And so, although I've spent time on how the majority of companies fall into the traction gap and fail, the truth be told is we have a lot of work to do here to make this a profession, to make product management a profession. And I think we have a lot of opportunity for that. Okay. So let me spend some time here just quickly here on go-to-market. So let me tell you this. The traction gap, and I'm going to use B2B, software as a service as my model. I'm not going to talk about B2C e-commerce, B2C marketplaces, B2C advertising supported. That's work to be done. So this data here is about, in general, what does it take for a B2B, software as a service company to traverse the gap? First off, you don't get forever. You get roughly a year to build your product, about a half a year to go from that initial product release to polish it, to reach an MVP. You get a year and a half to get to MVR and a year to get to MVT. Why? Well, that's because 40 or 50 other SaaS companies who are public did that. Okay? That's how long it took. And I'm going to give you the numbers at these points so you can use them as reference. So it's not my number. I didn't make it up. These are the numbers that were forged, the path that was created that all of us have to go through, whether we like it or not. And it is how you will be judged by investors as to whether you are making it through this process. Yeah. That's what I said. It's B2B, software as a service. That's it, right? Yeah. It varies. Work to be done, and I'll explain what we're in the process of doing. Work to be done is those models, right? We need to create others. Because, for example, revenue is important here, but in a B2C, it might be daily active usage rates, right? It might be downloads, right? A different measurement. Okay, so I'm going to pull out this. We get about 3 years to go from MVP, well, about 2.5 to go from MVP to MVT, but 3 years to kind of traverse the entire gap. The numbers here, again, this comes from S1's public and private data that I pulled through. I got working with Correlation Ventures and a variety of other groups to pull this data. But basically, these are the numbers that you're going to need to hit. You need to go from MVP to MVT in 2.5 years, and you need to reach 6 million of annual recurring revenue. Okay? And the way that you do it is 1 year after MVP, you need to be at 1 million ARR, another half a year to get to 2 million, and then another year to get to 6. So you have to build your revenue engine, your salespeople, your marketing people, all of your input of what it's going to take to generate revenue. You have to fit to this model. And by the way, this is just kind of the average. Wait till I tell you or show you what the best in class have done during this time frame. Okay. So how do you use this? How do we use this? I'm going to give you just a simple made-up company. Let's say that you have an ACV or an average contract value of 60K. You're great at acquiring customers, 60K. I'm telling you, most people are not great. It's 3 times. So, but this is just for, editorial purposes. Our target is to go from MVP to MVR in 1.5 years. Okay? So that's $2 million in ARR. So how do we use this? Pretty simple. MVR is 2 million ARR divided by 60K per customer. That's what it costs. So we need 33 customers, and we're going to need $2 million in capital. Just simple math. That's just sales and marketing, though. That's the capital to acquire. That doesn't mean dragging the rest of the company along. That's the other 50%. That's GA, that's R&D, etc. So I'm going to need another $2 million in that same time frame. So I'm not counting ideation to initial product release and then to MVT. I'm just talking about the time frame from when you have this minimum viable product till you reach this point, minimum viable repeatability. So you're going to need about $4 million in capital. And then from there, you got to get to MVP. There is no way that you're going to raise enough money at MVP or IPR in order to be able to traverse this gap. Okay? So the strategy here is to reach these oases, these financial oases, MVP, MVR, and MVT, in the time frames that I've described, so that way you can raise money from the next venture capital group that lives in the ecosystem. Because at MVT are the big brand firms, etc., unless you're Josh James and you did Omniture, and then you're going to do Domo on a napkin. But for the rest of us poor people who have to live in the real world and raise money, you've got to be on that revenue path. If you're not on that revenue path, if you don't meet these numbers and you don't have this kind of capital spend, you're off model. And when you're off model, you are less interesting to the venture community. Okay, so what is that model? I gave you that time period, which is from MVP to MVT. But here's the daunting news. The SaaS model says, if you want to follow, be average, be the median, not average, be the median, from MVP to 50 million of ending ARR within 5.5 years. Why? That's what 40 others have done. That's what and I'm going to show you what the best in class have done. So I pulled this from a lot of data and a lot of work with a lot of companies, But this is what you have to architect for. So just like you architect your product, so your data model doesn't dissolve underneath you because you didn't think of something, 2 years down the road, you have to design a revenue architecture that allows you to scale to this. So a good buddy of mine, Niraj at Battery Ventures, he put together a model. Amazing that our stuff came together and we didn't even talk. So this means that I'm not as smart as Niraj, but he did a pretty good job. So this is available, I think. I don't know. I forgot where I pulled this. But this is the best in class. So these are the best companies. This is what they've done. And notice how fast. And this isn't even from MVP. This is from year 1 of formation. So they went from basically 0 to roughly 100 million in 5 years. Marketo actually took a little bit longer than that. So this is what you are up against. It's what you're going to be measured by, and it's how we're going to be tested. Yep. No, I think you can get there on 80 or so, 75 to 80, but next year needs to be, within visibility of 100, 120. Okay, so I'm going to finish up here. I know I'm over. So what I want to do is tell you is that when we went through all this process, we got all this data, we disassembled it, we reaggregated, we put it into a framework. I wrote a lot. And then, excuse me, I said, it's fine that we put this together as Wildcat, but the truth is, this is what we need as an industry. So we Wildcat, funded a brand new entity called the Traction Gap Institute. The goal of this is to track, capture, and publish the metrics that we just talked about, and to share these with everybody, so we can all use it. Because the truth is that the more startups that work, the more limited partner capital will be made available, which means I get to still be in business. Charter sponsors are Wildcat and Velocity. So John Baird and Ben Taub and a number of other folks are helping us in the process of, we're interviewing 20 CEOs who all went through the Traction Gap, notable CEOs that you've heard of. We are going to be publishing that data. And in fact, we're going to be sharing with you the first data sets with you on March 2nd here in San Francisco with Phil Fernandez as our first speaker to talk about what he did to make it across the Traction Gap, specifically targeting team architecture. How did you create it? What's MVT for the team? What did he do? How did he look at it? Our vision is to, over time, build playbooks, workshops, provide the ability for all of us to share this, because there is no other place to go to learn. And our ask is the same thing that we ask of ourselves, is to help contribute to this, because there is no one individual, no one group that can possibly know all of this material. So we're just going to act as a centralized repository to capture it and then to republicize it and make it available to all of you. Okay, so thank you very much for spending time with me. I hope this was interesting. Yeah. Yes, so if you want to, let me see. So AMAESTRI@wildcat.bc. The website will be up in a couple of days, but if you want, just send it to Amanda Maestri at wildcat.bc, and we'll sign you up. All right? Okay.
Bruce, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. That was really fantastic. All right. One quick thing here. All right. So one thing you've noticed is Bruce shared all this content for the first time with you guys. This is something I know many of you have been here before. This is something we try to do every month, that our speaker shares something that has never been shared before. His partner, Geoffrey Moore, spoke at our event about a year ago, at our programs about a year ago. He also shared brand new content based on his new book. If you want to watch the videos of any of our program, you can go to our website, productsthatcount.com. We'll post Bruce's video as soon as it's produced. Usually it's by the weekend. A couple of things. One is we're going to do shout-outs now. So shout-outs, you get 10 seconds to talk about something that's important to you. Either you're hiring or you're looking for a job, you're looking for funding, you're looking for a team, usability, whatever you have to share and want input from the audience, please line up here and you can get to pitch your idea. And everybody who is coming for a shout out will get a special treat tonight. I also want to give a few giveaways. So 2 given by our sponsors. One, our sponsor WeChat. Shirley, can you tell me who's going to get our gift tonight? Go for it. Yes.
So tonight we have a special WeChat group for tonight's event, so you can continue to interact with friends here tonight and meeting people. And then at first we were thinking about choosing someone from the WeChat group to give the special gift. But since we just set it up and there's not many people setting up for the WeChat group, that I think we are giving the gift to the first people who shout out, and then SC will give out special gift and follow SC's products.com channel on WeChat.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Sounds good. All right. So who has some shout outs? Please line up here. And then I also want to talk about our event next month. It's going to be on February 22nd. And we're hosting a speaker, Kim Scott, who is a former executive at Google and Apple, who was a coach to the CEO of Dropbox and a bunch of other fast-growing companies. And she's going to talk about how do you lead, give, and get feedback. Her concept is radical candor. And if you haven't watched her TED Talk, you really should. She has a book that's coming out where she's going to share her approach. And all of us in product, we need to influence people. We need to give feedback. We need to receive feedback. So I'm really looking forward to hear what she has to share. All right, go for it.
Hi, I'm Shivani Bhargava, the CEO and founder of The Right Margin, a smart, goal-driven writing web app that helps you finish what you write. Excuse my voice. So we just launched an issue advocacy tool that helps you write letters to Congress. So if people are looking to get involved, please check it out. It has all the guidance set up for you. It skips a lot of steps instead of having to search for templates, etc. It gives you links, etc., to your representatives. So if you're looking to get involved, just check it out. therightmargin.com.
Thanks. Hey, I'm James from Workday, one of the best-in-class companies we just heard about. If any of you would like to build software for the world's biggest companies, or if you're doing anything interesting in the enterprise space, please feel free to come and speak to me. We've now got Workday Ventures as part of Workday, so we make investments in enterprise companies doing cool things in the world of work and finance software. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Mark Annis. I'm founder of Bolt, Business Operations Leaders in Technology. We are a group of professionals who work in the trenches helping companies like we heard about today scale. So if you're interested, check us out. Our web address is boltsf.org, boltsf.org.
Any other shout-outs? All right. One last thing. You probably have an email in your inbox right now where we're asking you for feedback. We take this super seriously. We'll ask you very, very simple questions, but it's super helpful for us to make our events better. It's super helpful for our speaker so that they can, improve and learn from you. So if you could take just 1 minute to fill it in, that would be awesome. And then you get another half hour to enjoy, network, beer, pizza, and get to know each other. Please keep Yelp clean. We're going to be closing at 9. Thank you very much.
I'm 14 carats, I'm 14 carat.